Welcome to AI Decoded, the show where we demystify AI one episode at a time. And today we're going to talk about trusting the technology, trusting AI, trusting technology in general. And I want to start with a little bit of something you might be able to relate to. Let's talk about GPS. Do you remember the first time GPS told you the wrong directions or told you to take a left turn whenever you weren't expecting it to? You probably didn't like run off a bridge or run into a lake or anything like that, but those things are possible and they do happen. And it's examples of things like that make us wonder, can we trust technology as we use it in our lives? Uh, we don't often hear about people running off of bridges or into ponds and getting hurt by the GPS instance of this. But I know that most of us have experienced it. I know that I have made several weird turns because my car told me to go away that I didn't expect it to. And it might have been because there was road construction or a bridge was out up ahead or there was an accident it didn't know about. And sometimes it seems totally random. It seems completely random to me why it made that decision and informed me a certain way. And I have the option to trust it or not. And inherently, we just trust it. You know, it's put in our lives. It's very knowledgeable. We expect that it knows what it's doing. So we just listen to it and we follow its guidance. And sometimes that gets us driven into a lake. There's actually a word for this that came around in the 1980s called automation bias. So this is something where we allow automation into our lives and then we just inherently accept it. If it was built and it's a big product like GPS, it's a global thing that exists, well, it must be good enough to give us proper information and we should be able to trust that pretty readily and then just go and do what it says most of the time. Is that how you'd feel about it, Devin?
Well, I have had many a case of driving on the wrong exit or entrance on an interstate and then having to spend an extra 30 or 40 minutes navigating Dallas and Houston traffic. So,
Yeah.
most certainly it's something that I've experienced in my life. And not just GPS, but there's many technologies that have led me astray, as I'm sure it has you.
Yeah, for sure. GPS is just one example that I think we can all kind of relate to, but there are a ton of other ones. I mean, we have interactions with automation all the time. You might have smart home appliances, you might have smart home thermostats, you might have smart electric meters. There's all kinds of things that we just allow to make decisions for us, and we have to inherently trust those or decide that we don't. And making that decision is really hard, and understanding what the line is between is this something I should trust and believe in or not is kind of blurry sometimes. And when it comes to AI specifically, it gets even more so. And we'll get into why that is specific for AI further in the segment. But for now, let's talk about some instances where that can have some real repercussions.
And I think one of the biggest instances right now is showing up in the legal field.
Yeah, definitely.
Thankfully, this hasn't transitioned as much into medicine quite yet. So, we don't have to worry about the AI or Surgeon GPT quite this second. But in the legal field, we're starting to see an abundance of cases where bad information is being used to construct arguments, cases that didn't exist, precedents that never happened. There is a college in Paris, HEC Paris, which is a business school, that has a database keeping track of global instances where court cases, or somebody in the court case, whether the lawyer or a legal aid or paralegal or somebody, introduced an argument that was based on incorrect information produced by AI. And this is not specific to any one platform. Claude can do this, ChatGPT can do this, Perplexity can do this. Basically, anything that you use, which is a large language model, is capable of hallucinating. And what's interesting is that globally, there's about 5 to 8 new cases every single day of arguments being made predicated on bad information. And I think that, Curtis, back me up on this, it's a very, very interesting one because it doesn't it's unlike generating a report or something where the overall report is correct. Everything it's saying is correct, but maybe this one sentence is based on a bad data set or an article that didn't exist. When it comes to the legal field, the entire case can be based off of just one bad case that didn't exist.
Yeah, and unfortunately what we see in some of these is that one bad case means the precedent that you wanted to build your entire legal representation on is hallucinated. So all the foundation of every other argument you make is based on something that doesn't exist, and everything just falls apart immediately. And like Devin is saying, with legal ramifications, there's a lot more on the line when you are trying to fight a legal battle based on non-factual information than just writing a report that maybe is a grade or doing some research about something you want to do or trying to find a recipe. It has real life-altering, potentially, ramifications.
And I think to connect this back into what we've talked about previously in the show is that you can't abstract humans out of AI. There is a dream of many business owners that they can run their entire business and replace everything and everybody with an AI, but it's just not the case. And to paint that even further in this legal news story that we have, 59% of the people that they found that introduced a bad argument based on bad information or hallucinated information were self-represented people who, for whatever reason, didn't have a lawyer.
Yeah.
And so it's happened still. There's been plenty of famous stories or popular stories where actual lawyers with years of experience introduce something bad. But imagine they're used to seeing cases every day. They have a wide knowledge base of cases that they've already seen, read through, arguments they've already made to pull from, and they still make mistakes. So imagine how bad it can get when you've never practiced law, you've never studied law, and then you just take AI at its word that this is something that exists.
Yeah, and it's really complicated to read in the first place. I mean, just understanding that the precedent you're trying to use in a legal case, if you go read those source documents, they're not easy to understand. It's very easy for AI to give you something false and then just completely go down that rabbit hole. And it's really interesting to me that you said, Devin, like most of these people are self-representing. And again, that does point to the fact that human beings still need to be somewhere in the process to understand that the machine is putting things out that are useful, right?
And more importantly, I think, knowledgeable human beings.
Yeah, knowledgeable, trained human beings.
Yes. And that provides a good opportunity to segue into our next topic after the break, which is why does AI hallucinate? And then why is it important to kind of know what to look for and to kind of have a background in what you're researching, what you're doing when you go into this? All right, so in the previous segment, we talked about a few prominent examples of technology failing us in the automation bias, and then a current news story about how AI is contributing and the impacts and acceleration that AI is having on that automation bias. So, Curtis, you are the resident expert for AI here.
Yeah.
Why does it do this? I mean, you'd think that this technology is so confident about everything it says.
Sure.
Every time I ask it a question, I have yet for it to tell me it doesn't know.
Yeah.
Why can't it just say, I don't know?
Yeah, because we actually train it to do this. It's a desired outcome. It's trained more like a student on a multiple choice question test. And if you think about those, if you don't know the answer on a multiple choice question test, the guidance, the thing that people tell you to do is just bubble one in and guess, because you will be right part of the time, even if you don't know, right? So AI is trained to do the same thing. It's not part of the actual training data. It's more about the feedback loop we do after training. So once it's trained, it's actually given a feedback loop. It puts out stuff. It's asked questions, and then it gets feedback about what those answers are, if they're good or they're bad, negative, positive, all of those things. So as humans, when we want an answer to something, we want it to sound authoritative. So we want to feel confident that the answer is correct, and the answer being confidently worded makes us feel like it's correct. And the AI it's benefited by just putting out an answer, regardless of if it has the answer or not. So that's the inherent reason why we hallucinate with AI, is that it's really a desired outcome. We haven't trained it to be able to say, I don't know confidently, because as humans, when someone says, I don't know, we don't think that they know what they're doing. So we have actually trained it into the hallucination loop that we have today.
And so is there a world where this gets fixed?
Yeah, I don't know that there is. It's kind of a desired outcome. Now, there's a lot of ways that you as a user of AI can kind of take this on and help it to defeat that guardrail. But just inherently, that's how the models are trained to behave, and it's for a lot of reasons. So when you're asking, let's take the legal case example. So if we're saying we're going to go to court because of a dispute about the property line on my property, then I'm going to go ask it about recent case law or historic case law that would win me the case because someone said a property line was this way 10 years ago. Now, if it doesn't know that, then it's going to make it up. But if I was doing creative writing and I wanted it to output good creative writing, then that authoritative ability to make it up actually makes the creative writing better. So by targeting different things, we're trying to get AI to do so many things at once. And by targeting all those different things, the hallucination is just a component of what we're trying to do to compensate in areas that we may or may not be using when it hallucinates. Does that make sense, Devin?
Yeah, no, is this a kind of thing that if it didn't have that hallucination, that it would just kind of throw off the entire chat and, looking at it to have that small hallucination is better because maybe the overall broad context of everything is correct? Or why would the hallucination be better than simply just saying, I don't know?
Yeah, and it's not about the mechanics of the model at all. So its ability to either not give you an answer or say, I don't know, or refuse to answer, those all exist within the model. When the model takes your question and it does what's called an attention pass, and it looks at its training data to say, okay, what things in my data relate to what you asked me, it gets information back. And those things, if it has a lot of information it can draw from, gives you a really solid foundational answer. If it has very thin amounts of information or the question you asked isn't packed with enough information for it to actually understand your question, it will just make things up because we've told it that answers that are complete are better answers. You should always complete your answers. You should always give an authoritative response. You should always be confident in your output. So it's not a case of one way or the other in this instance.
So I use AI a lot for marketing activities to help strategize campaigns, to pull examples from other places. Now, over time, I've learned one of the best things for me to do is to tell it only cite specific sources.
Yeah.
Show me your sources.
Yeah.
Do not, if you are unsure about anything, tell me your confidence level with it.
Right.
But I've noticed where it tends to have, at least for my use cases, the biggest issues is pulling in numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'll notice it'll make up websites. It just makes up a source completely. You go to click the website. It turns out the website doesn't exist.
Sure.
I've noticed, ironically enough, one thing that I would think would be easy at would be taking data from a spreadsheet or taking a data table and just putting it on a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
But it seems to really struggle with that sometimes.
Yeah.
What are some other areas where these hallucinations tend to crop up the most, and then why is that?
Yeah, so I think you've pointed at a lot of the major ones. It tends to make things up when it doesn't have enough data from its own training. It tends to make things up whenever it can't understand your question or what's called the context. And then a lot of times what you're referring to from the spreadsheet pull-ins, that ability to retain and repeat an exact number sequence or a collection of numbers or a collection of tabled data is really difficult. And so frontier models, let's talk about Claude for a minute. They have tools within them to kind of do that. So when you hand a spreadsheet to Claude, it's not actually using the LLM to process a lot of that. It's writing a script. So it actually writes code that processes your document and then hands you back information that it processed through the code. So that's kind of how they're avoiding that in those situations. Some of the other ones are just really basic. I mean, if you ask it about fictional, like you ask it someone's name that it doesn't know, it might come up with a name for them or a backstory or those kind of things. It kind of triggers the creative writing aspect of the models. And again, it all points back to us trying to do so much with one model. It's not like you go to Claude because you're going to do creative writing, and then you go to ChatGPT because you're going to do math, and then you go to Gemini because you want to form a legal paper. It's not like we spend on the frontier, on the really high market side of things. We don't spend a lot of time making the model focused on any particular activity. More so, we try to go for this, and you've probably heard the term, the artificial general intelligence, right? So We're trying to make it smarter in general, which also makes it hallucinate more often in general.
So why is the answer to this not just smaller, more specialized models?
That's partly the answer. I mean, those do exist. There are smaller specialized models for specific use cases, but that's not where the market's going. I think some of that is motivated by the market itself. There's a lot of investment dollars in AI. And to get those investment dollars, they have to be able to say our addressable market for this product is, 600 million people. Because there's just not a lot of profit in deploying AI at that scale. So they have to make it work for everybody. They want to be the model that everyone uses for everything. They want to be the if we look at Google as a search engine, that's the search engine everyone uses for everything. They want to be the Google of LLMs, so they try to do everything well. And that has its downsides. Yeah, so we don't see a lot of the small model thing happen.
So it sounds like there's an economy of scale at play here that keeps it from moving in more of the small model direction.
Yeah, and I mean, there are some very specific small models. I know there's some that are used for scientific research. There's some that are used for math. Some really deep use cases. There's some that are really good at specific kinds of code, like Python. And they're trained specifically on that so that when they're working on those subjects, they have enough training data in the model to not hallucinate as often. But if you ask that same model a question about creative writing, it is going to hallucinate the entirety of creative writing for you.
And if I pull in some wrong data for a marketing campaign, the worst that it does is potentially bias my objectives and what I strategically look at in order to execute on.
Yeah.
But the world doesn't end. Nobody dies. The worst case is you lose a couple of weeks while you figure out that wasn't the correct way to go. You augment, you adjust, and you move on.
Yeah.
Obviously, I can see legal, I can see medical, probably engineering and other high-stakes things being a particular issue. But what are other areas where this could probably present a huge issue with over-reliance upon?
So when you look at what you categorize as negative impact, I think the biggest one that stands out to me is government's use of AI. So the government processing data with AI, we just talked about how spreadsheet processing and large data processing sometimes leads to hallucinations of data. Imagine if it's processing records databases for large quantities of U.S. citizens, and they're trying to figure out patterns in those things so they can target maybe some national security threats or something like that. There's a potential for false positives in that area, and those things, like even if they, Devin, how would it affect your life if the Department of Defense came and arrested you as a potential national security threat because AI, miscategorized you? Like, would that be critical enough to be what you're talking about? I think it would be, right?
Life-changing.
Yeah, super life-changing. Even if they came back around with the proper information and said, yeah, you know what, that was actually an error in the data. By the time you've gotten to that point, and your life is already detrimentally harmed, right?
Yeah, and it seems like that's an issue of another scale issue there. You know, I mean, I don't want to hear that my doctor is using AI to figure out the proper cut, but it's on that term, it's one person potentially impacting one life, which is horrible and shouldn't happen. And please, doctors, be very careful with the AI you use.
Yeah.
But when you're dealing with large numbers of people, it just seems like there is an opportunity for larger errors across a wider number of people and wider populations.
Yeah, and I think about this personally, and especially in healthcare. So like, I don't have any qualms with my doctor using AI to like further research my symptoms, right? So the doctors already should be informed; they're certified about let's take a cold. They know how a cold works. They know how to identify a cold. Maybe they want some further information to make sure they're right, but they already have a suspicion of what they're after. Those kind of things, maybe how best to treat this given a different condition that I have, maybe something they're not as informed in that they can get some insight in before they make a critical decision. But they have the foundational knowledge to make that decision. And then I think about, like autonomous AI-driven surgical robots, right? So there are instances where that is great and it's not detrimental, but I wouldn't want one of those doing a triple bypass on me. I would prefer that be human hands, even though I know the human hands are still likely, not likely, but there's a percentage of possibility that surgery still ends negatively. But I'd rather that be in the hands of a human than AI. It's just one of those human components of our lives, right? How much do we trust the automation? How much are we willing to trust the automation?
Gotcha. So before we go into this next break, is there a good rule of thumb for people to remember for the specific types of information that they need to flag,
Yeah.
always flag and review?
Yeah, so when it's high stakes and hard to verify, that's when you should review the information. If it's something that is critical, a critical foundational component to something you're doing, or everything hinges on, and there's large consequences of it being wrong, or even medium consequences of it being wrong, and it's hard to verify, you should always verify that. If it's not impactful and easy to verify, then you should still verify that. Honestly, it's easy to do, or it wouldn't be in that category. But since it's not as potentially harmful, it's not as important to double check.
Perfect. All right. And in the next segment, we'll be talking a little bit more about what you can actually do to help verify things.
Welcome back to AI Decoded. So we've been talking about if you can trust automation bias, automation, LLMs, technology in your life, specifically LLMs in this conversation. And we've kind of arrived at the place where we're going to talk about what you can do to make sure the information you're getting out of an LLM is trustworthy. What kind of steps you can take, what kind of things you can do to verify, a lot of those things. So the base rule is if it's names, numbers, dates, links, you should always check those. If it's giving you the name of a historical figure, if it's giving you the name of a case in legal law, if it's giving you numbers and other things like that have link references, URLs, you should click those and you should read it. You should take the time to read that information. You should do a little bit of research, do a couple of Google searches, just make sure that what the LLM is giving you is within the realm of reason there. And I'll go back to what I said in the last segment about what the kind of rules are. If it's high stakes and hard to check, you should always spend more time checking it. If it's low stakes and easy to verify, you should just verify it because it's easy to verify. And if you're just drafting something, if you're just coming up with the rough sketch of it, then that's okay if you don't spend as much time verifying. But you should always dig in much further before you call the document or the research or the legal case. Hopefully you're not representing yourself, but if you are, before you call that good, you should always do a maximum amount of research of your own to make sure the LLM has given you proper information. What kind of things do you see when you're using AI that you do to keep it on the rails, Devin?
So one of the first things that I like to always do is, as I said, when I'm doing research, I tell it explicitly, do not put anything that you're not confident about, or tell me if the confidence level for something. So if I'm asking it to give me answers like, I don't know, let's say a market research report that I'm working on, I will tell it to cite its sources, and then I will say, do not make anything up. If you are unsure, ignore this, and then tell me unsure in this spot, or tell me that this particular concept or this particular thing you're looking for, there is insufficient data, and I'll have it tell me where I need to go or what I need to do to try to find something to kind of bridge that gap manually. That's one of the big ones. Another area where I'm always very careful with is just names, dates, places, people, any kind of numbers. Anything where there's something hard fact that's not abstract, where there's room for interpretation, where it's literally trying to go and find something. And the reason for that is because that's where it messes up the most, because those are hard data points. And if it doesn't have it in the training data, and if it can't easily find it online, that's where it tends to make something up that has the biggest impact, I find.
Yeah, exactly. So I find some of those same things. Now, I don't necessarily do marketing research papers, but I always ask for citations. I always read those citations. I've also found that whenever you ask follow-up questions, so if I'm asking it to output, give me the early history of the Earth, right? And give me citations for scientific papers that reference the things you're talking about. So I'll let it do something like that. And then I will verify some of those things, and then I will probe further questions. I'll be like, so in this period, was this dinosaur alive? And like, what was the atmosphere like here? I read in this paper that it's like that, and I spend some time iterating it. The models that we use now, the large language enterprise models, are all thinking models. So what they're doing is they're taking your information, they're outputting, and then they're running back through their own outputs. So I'm kind of feeding that cycle with more of my information, and that's we gave this tip to you really early in one of our very early episodes. But spend your time making your prompt, right, Evan? Like some of those prompts that you're using for the marketing research, I'm sure they're very long. So like how do you structure that to avoid some of this hallucination?
Well, it's just about trying to understand what the outcome that you're looking for is, where the biggest opportunities for error, for hallucination are going to be, and then structuring around that, I think. So you need to look at addressing a prompt as multiple components of an answer rather than just one paragraph that says, do this.
Yeah.
You need to say, do this in this way. Look for this information. It needs to be in this format. This is where you're going to need to double check.
Yeah.
It's about having multi-step prompting rather than just one large instruction that it now has to go through and on its side break down into different steps, because it's going to mess up those steps potentially.
Yeah, you're relying on the model to do that for you. And so you really have to get to the point before you start asking the questions of the model of just conceptually understanding how you're asking and why you're asking the question, especially if it's something that's totally new to you, right?
Well, and I think one area, before we kind of start wrapping up here, one area that we didn't speak of that's not just a straight up hallucination, but is another area for concern is the ability for AI to act sycophantically.
Yeah.
So this isn't necessarily a straight up hallucination where it's wrong, but I find that for the everyday person using AI in their personal life, this is an area where it can puts you into a state of mind of overconfidence to lead you into wrong territory.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's encouraged in its training data and feedback loops to agree with you. And that's what you mean by sycophantically in this case.
Yes. And so I think that whenever you're doing something personally, so I'll use AI for helping to develop some exercise plans, or if I'm trying to look at I want to try to look at this diet and what should I do here? Or, hey, I need to make this decision. Can you help me kind of pull some examples? When it says things like, you're so right. And this is a really great way of thinking about this.
It does that a lot, yeah.
Even if the information isn't a hallucination that it gives you, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the only interpretive answer or the only interpretation for the question that you asked. And when it says things like, you're so right, or you did a great job, or that's excellent way to think about it. We love to be complimented.
Yeah.
But that puts you into a headspace where you may be less focused on finding errors or finding issues or trying to think about things in different ways.
Yeah.
And so it's not a straight up hallucination, but I definitely think it plays on a human's ability for confirmation bias.
Yeah, and that plays directly into the automation bias, right? Like if we feel like it agrees with us and it's confident about those answers, we are more confident in the fact that we're right, which can be detrimental. And I think that's what we saw a lot in those legal cases we talked about in the first segment. So when I'm doing something really deep and detailed and doing a lot of research, I typically do a multi-conversation thread here. So I start with understanding the base topic, and then I have it give me citations, and I read those, and I start to understand. Then I pick at the information. But then, like you're saying here for the particular it agrees with me case of hallucination, I actually have it debate me. So I go through a whole debate with the model and have it give me the counterpoints and then tell me why I'm wrong. I force it to tell me I'm wrong so that I know what it's telling me is something that I can actually go back and forth with, and it's not just agreeing with me.
Yeah, and I think just a final rule of thumb here that everybody can use to stick to is names, dates, places, numbers, addresses, times, anything that is a hard fact should always be double checked. But any time that something sounds too good to be true, or any time that it's hyping you up, also should be looked at with a certain level of suspicion.
Yeah.
And I think if you can look at each of those things and always remember to double check. Always remember that the higher stakes, the more research that needs to be done outside of the LLM, then for the most part, I think most people are going to catch a good chunk of the hallucinations or a good chunk of areas where AI can steer you wrong.
Yeah, definitely don't trust it. Check it. That's the rule. At the end of the day, whatever you put out in the world with an LLM has your name on it, not the LLM's. So don't trust it. Check it. If it's not easy to check, then maybe consider how you're going about it, and then do a lot more research. LLM and AI do not solve everything for you. This is one component where you have to do your due diligence.
Yeah. Incredibly important.
Yeah.
And so thanks everybody for tuning in. This is Devin Hargrove and Curtis Siemens, AI Decoded, and we'll see you next week.